Welcome on into our continuing coverage of the PWHL offseason and the opening of the exclusive re-signing window for free agents on every team. Teams will have about 10 days here before the draft to re-sign any of the players who are on the one-year deals on their team, and that's actually a great percentage. There's about 13 per team, 80 in all over the league, and many of them probably are going to want to stay where they are. There isn't a huge financial reason for them to leave, so it would be more things like changing due to location or perhaps their role on the team or the fit or just, returning to somebody or somewhere that they know. But teams have a vested interest, of course, in keeping their stronger free agents. So let's bring up a list for each team and see who that might be. So it's believed there have already been some important conversation among the players, their agents, and teams to negotiate extensions. We could expect to see some of those announced here pretty quickly in the upcoming days. With the draft on June 10th, I think teams will want to get this done as soon as possible. But there will be, 7 new players per team. Maybe at least 4 or 5 will be signed and play an important role. So that will leave other free agents available to sign when the June 21st signing period opens, and who I think they'll likely let go or at least wait to see if they can sign an upgrade and maybe return to those players once that June 21st signing period opens. It's going to be interesting for sure. And with 6 new players potentially joining, it's like every team gains an entire line and D pair more or less. So those 4th line players and 5th and 6th defensemen are likely going to be pushed out of the league for at least a season or 2, if not permanently. So something really interesting, and when you line up the new players, it really makes the teams look stronger than what they were this year with some of the names that are joining. So in no particular order, if we start with PWHL Boston, you can see that they do have a good core of players signed for 3 years, a great group to build around. And on the 2-year deals, so these players will be locked up for sure. They're already guaranteed Jessica DiGirolamo staying, Taylor Gerard, Susanna Tapani, Lauren Gable. So things are looking good there. When you glance over their list of free agents, to me, it's first of all the defense, Kaylee Fratkin and Emily Brown. I would think that they would want to lock those 2 up in this exclusive signing window, and I think they both would want to stay. They had good seasons and proved that they were really stalwarts on the back end. And then next for me would be Sophie Shirley. She's got a ton of potential. She might look to going back to a Canadian team, but she had a good season with Boston. I think I would look at signing her as well. And then on the kind of flip a coin, wait and see, I would say Lexia Gia. They might want to let her test the open market and see how they do in the draft to see if they need to bring back a power forward like that. And same with Hannah Brandt. She's a valuable player, but, getting up there a little bit. And if they were able to draft someone like Hannah Bilka, another offensive player like Sarah Chalmerson, they might be able to do without someone like that. They did have their 2 playoff stalwarts, Taylor Wenskowski and Amanda Pelkey, on the list here. I think that, they're such good role players, you'd want them back. But if you look at the talent in the draft and kind of plug in some holes there, it starts to look kind of dicey for players that are hanging on to those 4th line spots. So who knows as far as Wenskowski and Pelkey, but if Boston is able to draft some scoring players, the team could look a lot different. So we'll keep an eye on that for sure. So moving on to Montreal, this is a really interesting one because they do have a great core of 6 players locked up. And then on the 2-year deals, they only have 3, Katie Tabin, Dominika Lashkova, and Kennedy Marchment. And don't forget that they played without Lashkova and Marchment throughout the playoffs and, in fact, most of the season. So that's going to make a great difference already on their back end. And they have a boatload of free agents that they might want to look at signing. I think it starts with Amanda Boulier and Mariah Keppel. Again, get those defensemen locked up. They're very important players. And Montreal had to play without Sarah Lafleur and Sarah Bugeaud for a lot of the playoffs. I think they're both on the maybe wait and see list. So I think if I'm PWHL Montreal, I am looking at locking up Keppel, Boulier, and Elaine Chuli for sure. I think Chuli might want to find out if there's a starting job out there for her. But, it might be a wise thing to do to re-sign with Montreal and play that important role, maybe split time a little more evenly this year with Desbiens. So there are players that definitely are going to fall off this roster. We saw them not play at all in the playoffs. That's a pretty good sign that they're not going to be returning. After that, though, Montreal is going to draft some defensemen. I think they're probably going to look at Claire Thompson and give their blue line a whole different look. So it's going to be some interesting changes in Montreal and for all the teams, of course. And now if we turn to the Walter Cup champion, PWHL Minnesota, they actually have 7 players under contract for the 3 years because they traded for Sophie Jakes. So she is under contract, which is good news for them. They've got a great core and, everybody looks better when you win. So it's nice that they've got Maggie Flaherty, Natalie Bookbinder, Denisa Khryshova, and Maddie Rooney locked up on the 2-year deals. And then if you look at their list of free agents, there's one name above all else that I think jumps out as a must sign during this period. Of course, that's Michaela Cava, who played on a line with Kendall Coyne and Taylor Heisey. They've got to get her locked up, and she was a really important player. If she doesn't, she will definitely be one of the most coveted free agents on the market. After that, I think it's almost wide open. I think they would want to lock up Liz Sheppers and then maybe look at Sophia Cunnan and Claire Buterak, but they might want to wait and see who they draft. So it's going to be interesting. I think each team might sign maybe 2 to 3 players in the window and then see who they draft and then circle back around to maybe 2 or 3 more names. If we look now at the first place overall PWHL Toronto, like all teams, they've got a great core locked up, including their goaltender, Kristen Campbell. And on the 2-year deal, they do have league leading scorer, Natalie Spooner. We really hope she comes back strong from her knee injury. And it's nice that they do have Callie Flanagan and Maggie Connors locked up, Victoria Bach as well, who's more of a 4th liner, and Jessie Comfer as well. Those are important players that were able to give them some depth, down the stretch and into the playoffs. So looking at their list of free agents, there's one name hugely jumps out to me, Hannah Miller, who was more than a pleasant surprise. She was a great player for them. So they got to get her locked up during this initial period. And I'm looking as well at Allie Monroe on the blue line. I think she's somebody that they're going to want to get signed. She plays with Callie Flanagan and played some important minutes. After that, I think it's kind of wide open. This is where I think they'll want to see who they get in the draft. And I think they're going to go again for a strong Team Canada type presence with possibly Julia Gosling, possibly a Jennifer Gardner. So that might lead them to circle back to their D of Lauriane Rougeau, who I think was a really important player for them. Of course, she's the shootout hero, but, she played a role of that physical defender that they didn't have in other players. So unless they draft somebody like that, I think that Rougeau will probably be back. And then after that, players like Alexa Vasco and Samantha Kogan are going to be on that kind of wait and see list. Do they circle back to someone like that? Or if they get someone replacing them in the draft, or if they look to free agency, if they're able to attract any, hometown Ontario players that might want to return to this part of the country, they might need to let go of some players that want to move on or have to wait until the league expands. We don't know exactly what some of those players are going to do. If they're going to head to Europe to the SDHL for a year or two until the league expands, it's going to be a little uncomfortable for them if they want to extend their career and have to wait till there are possibly more teams that need some, expanded rosters. And then looking at PWHL New York, this roster needs a little help, let's be honest. When you look at their core players, I think they're fine. They've got Alex Carpenter, a hugely important player. And then on 2-year deals, they've got Chloe Arard, Jill Saulnier, and yes, Jade Downey-Landry is locked up. So I was speculating that she might be a free agent, but it turns out she is signed. So that's good news. Now, when you look at their free agents, I think they're going to replace these with basically all 7 of the players that they draft because they could use about 7 improvements here. Of course, they will want to re-sign Corinne Schroeder in goal. Of course, that will be their number 1 priority during this signing window. And then I think Abby Levy, they might be willing to part ways with her and possibly draft Gwyneth Phillips from Northeastern or even Reagan Kirk from Ohio State. I think that would be a good upgrade for them. And of course, you've got Klara Peslarova, just a stalwart from Czechia. I think any of those goaltenders would really help out the New York roster. After that, they probably want to look at Kayla Vespa and Emma Woods, but I don't even know if they need to sign them during this initial period. Maybe Woods would be a good signing. Peyton Levis is probably on their list, but it's more of a circle back for some of these players. And let's just pretend they draft someone like Sarah Fillier first overall. And the way I have it, and this is just a side note, I will be doing a mock draft, so be sure to hit subscribe and get notifications. I'll be doing that really soon. So let's say New York drafts Sarah Fillier first, and I think they might be able to grab Amanda Kessel in the 7th spot. Wouldn't that just be a nice upgrade for their forward ranks? And I think their roster could really improve depending on what the new coach wants to do. And looking at PWHL Ottawa, they have one of the most interesting storylines going right now in this free agency period. On their list of free agents are 2 really coveted important players. First of all, there's Katerina Mrazova. She was a leading scorer in the league before she had an injury, and she was on a 1-year deal, so she needs to negotiate to come back, and so does Daryl Watts. And we heard from Watts in the postseason interviews that she is going to test the market. She's a free agent, she has the right to look around, and she said so we wouldn't expect to see her signed right away, and that makes for an interesting draft scenario for Ottawa. Do they look to replace the skill, speed, and scoring that Watts brings? Or do they lean more into the sandpaper, grit, power type forward that they lost with Lexia Gia? So I think getting Mrazova signed is just job one. They need to get that done just so they can even breathe easy. They do have Jincy Rose, Haley Skimura, and Teresa Vanisheva on 2-year deals. So those are some good names. However, another name that's a free agent is actually Aneta Terelova, another of the Czech players. And you think that Ottawa has a bit of a built-in advantage with the presence of Coach McLeod and the Czech identity somewhat. But those are pretty big names. Terelova, Mrazova, Watts. You would think that all 3 of those need to get signed. And then after that, I think Ottawa would be willing to kind of roll the dice and see what else is available, who they get in the draft. All teams are really probably looking at re-signing some of their blue liners, so that would mean Zoe Boyd, possibly Emma Buckles, but those are the ones that I would expect them to see later on in the summer. So here again is just the overall look at who's signed, and you've got 36 players on 3-year deals, 23 on 2-year deals, which means only 59 players total are signed under contract for next year. The rest, it's going to be kind of a free-for-all. Grab your free agents and plug in those draft players. It's going to be a lot of fun. I will be at the draft on June 10th. I'll have lots of reports for you. By the way, don't forget to hit that super thanks. That really helps me. I am not monetizing all of my videos, including the podcast, because I want to bring you this content. So thank you so much for your support. Give me your comments on who you want your team to sign, whether you think they need to sign them right away, or if they can wait and see if some of their drafted players actually take those spots. It's going to be a lot more fun upcoming, more PWHL content. We'll see you guys in the next one.